like how they spread, or like are the seeds the problem, or are they spreading through their roots?
Yeah, absolutely. So annual weeds tend to rely on seeds for they may make some seeds, like with this bindweed here, and then spreading underground. So there's, yes, on what species it is. And for vegetable systems, they're summer annuals within in starting in mid-August. But for perennial crops, surprise, surprise, we tend to struggle with perennial weeds. So, we're creating this system that, for a certain type of plant, and it turns out there are other types of plants that are similar to what we're growing that will thrive in that environment. Um, so yeah, other differences between annuals and perennials. I guess in terms of targeting perennials, they're putting energy underground. So, with annuals, it's like it could be this tall, but if you pull it and get it out of the garden before it sets seed, it's kind of like no harm done. Whereas perennials, it could be just a few inches tall, and it's starting to send resources down. So it could be getting stronger. So I really try to stay on top of perennial weeds more than annuals. Um, the kind of there's three main ways to target perennial weeds. So you can repeatedly remove the top growth that will eventually deplete the resources underground. Do that for, if it's a small patch, maybe 1 year. If it's a bigger patch, maybe 2 or 3 years. It'll eventually starve it. So probably every 2 weeks, remove the top growth. And then eventually the root system doesn't have enough resources to survive the winter. An alternative would be tarping, so smothering the whole area, extending well beyond the existing zone, because they'll kind of realize that they're being smothered and will try to kind of root out around that boundary. Again, probably at least a year for that method. And then the third method would be systemic herbicides that are translocated down into the plant, especially if applied in the fall when perennials are preparing for winter. They're especially bringing resources down in the root system, so they bring the herbicide down with it, and those can be effective. But even still, with some larger established perennials, it could take a few applications of systemic herbicides over a couple of years. So it's more of a longer term type of scenario. But anyways, that was the tangent. What are some other differences between weed species that could impact the success of management?
Like requirements.
Yeah. So yep. Shade tolerant versus not. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's a good one. So, common purslane is one that's low growing, but I think also fairly shade intolerant. So that's a good one to shade out. Could be other differences, but I guess most of our agricultural weeds want full sun. So yeah,
What kind of root system is it? Is it cap window?
yeah, absolutely. Yep, that absolutely impacts our options with management. Grasses in particular have growing points that are right at the soil line, so they're protected from a lot of our management. So like mowing, for example, or flame weeding, which I'll talk about later. Grasses are protected from that and can recover more quickly than broadleaf weeds. So broadleaves, if I'm a typical broadleaf weed and I've got these branches like this, the growing points where cell division is happening and where new cells are being made, would be at my hands and my head. So if you came through and I was a small broadleaf weed and you chopped me down here, suddenly I don't have any way to make new shoots. And now, if I'm a larger one, I might have a way to recover there, or you might not have noticed that I have a small branch down here that can become like the new leader branch. But yeah, if it's small enough, mowing can kill, or destroying the top growth can kill broadleaf weeds. What are some other differences between weed species? Yeah, yeah. Nutrient requirements, certain likes or dislikes. Yeah, yeah. So oxalis, wood sorrel is something that you tend to see in higher pH, more moist soil. Lamb's quarters, pigweeds are nitrophilic and tend to thrive in very high fertility situations. So there are some differences there that you can see. I will say though, for the most part, weeds tend to be generalists as far as so a wide variety of weeds that thrive in a range of nutrient situations. Yeah, other ways that we can think about what species it is, and how that could impact our management.
Like there are some weeds that drop their seeds so late in the season that you kind of stop weeding your garden. You're mostly like harvesting and not really thinking about weeding anymore. And then the crabgrass, I think, is an example. Like suddenly it makes that seed and grows.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So like the timing of seed production, timing of emergence is another huge one. And all that phenology kind of thing is determined by the accumulation of temperature, growing degree days. Has anyone heard of the Network for Environment Weather Applications, NUWA? Oh, okay. So we're developing some models based on temperature that will allow us to predict when certain weeds emerge. For example, ragweed is one of our earliest summer annuals to emerge. Could start emerging in April, and it's pretty much done by June 1st. So this is huge for management. If you can delay until June 2nd, say, then you would have all the ragweed will have come up, and you'll have rototilled the ground or prepared your clean slate for planting, and you won't have ragweed in your garden. So yeah, the timing is really important, and also timing of when they're setting seed. Galansoga, hairy galansoga, is a common weed in vegetables that can set seed as soon as 3 weeks after emergence. So it's especially important to stay on top of that one. Yes, yeah, yep. It can very rapidly kind of put its last breath of energy into seed production, and those can mature to some extent. It wouldn't produce as many seeds as if it was left there, but yeah, it can produce some. What are some other differences between weeds? Why else would it be important to identify them accurately? Yeah, winter hardiness. Yeah, whether it survives the winter. So yeah, most of our summer annuals will die with our first frost. But a lot of our perennials are a little bit harder than that, can keep going. Perennials, as I said, will survive the winter through their root systems if they're herbaceous. If they're woody, then that woody structure will survive and will carry on. Let's do one more. One more difference between weeds. Yeah, yep. That could impact management. Yeah, well, actually, so there is there's a new startup that's looking at making some kind of like fake pollen. So like if you've got a field of pigweed that's about to, just completely, flower and make a ton of seed, that you could put out this like fake pollen that will bind with all of those receptors. And yeah, so yeah, pollination could be a factor for management. A few others that I wrote down. Susceptibility to herbicides is a big one. That ranges. Seed size. So horseweed, if you're familiar with that one, it kind of looks like goldenrod. It's an annual. It makes these white flowers that set seed and blow in the wind for, I think, up to a few miles. The seed has to be tiny in order for it to go in the wind. And so with that small seed, it has to emerge, or it has to germinate right on the soil surface. It can't push through more than like a quarter inch of soil. So if you have some seed of that on your ground, you think that there's been some seed rain, a little bit of tillage or some mulch should prevent that from establishing successfully. On the other end of the spectrum, something like velvet leaf has a relatively large seed and can emerge from maybe 5 or 6 inches deep. So below the level of some of our, shallow tillage or herbicides. And so could impact your management that way. Seed longevity. Oh, shoot, I forgot to talk about this with the last group. This is probably the most important thing. Seeds don't live forever. I think a lot of folks think, and there's these examples of like archaeological digs that they find a seed of pigweed or lamb's quarters and it germinates, is 1,000 years old or something like this. And just understand that this is like, if there's a graph of like 100% viability when it's first produced and it goes down every year, so there's this concept called a half-life. And so how long will it take for half of the seed to become inviable? And for most species, for a lot of our problematic weed species, pigweeds, crabgrasses, horseweed, it's like a year. So in 1 year, half of the seed will be inviable. 2 years, it'll be down to a quarter. So, and some farmers will say, well, I'm dealing with seeds from, a farmer 3 generations ago. And, to some extent you are, but most of the weeds emerging from seed are from just the past couple of years, likely. And so that's a good thing for management, because it means that if we can do a good job in our time gardening on the land, that we can deplete the weed seed bank very quickly. If you are adamant about not producing weed seed, not letting weeds come in, horseweed and dandelion that blow in the wind, they're the exceptions to the rule. Most agricultural weed seed just drops straight to the ground. So it's really just up to us to not allow that to happen. And it's especially important for weeds like lamb's quarters. This is 1 lamb's quarters worth of seed. How many seeds is this? It's 300,000 seeds. So they're about 1 milligram each. Imagine, I mean, I know it's hard, you've got so much going on with harvest and everything, but like there's a few weeds here and there that are just doing this. And it's like, wow. And you can see that when you come back the next year. Oh, that's where lamb's quarters was. So yeah, that's just key is prevention of seed production for our summer annuals. There are ways to deplete weed seed banks. You can do something called a stale seed bed to try to till and get as many weeds to germinate as you can ahead of planting, so you can come through and control them. Bare fallowing, cover cropping, even a cleaning crop like onions, there's something that you have to keep really weed free, can reduce the weed seed bank. Tarping, solarization could do that as well. 3 weeks is Tarping is less sensitive, and so in solarization you need hot sun. So solarization is clear plastic. Tarping is black plastic. And tarping, you're just preventing sunlight from getting to the plants, so they're kind of starving, and it'll take about 3 weeks for that to happen. Solarization is more based on how hot it is, how sunny it is. If it's middle of July, one hot day, all of this would be toast. But solarization, I think, is more of a seed bank tactic. You do it more for bare soil, and then bury the edges. It's done after a rain, or so a wet heat tends to penetrate more than the dry heat, and it actually cooks weed seeds. It gets so hot, up to 115, 120 degrees Fahrenheit, that weed seeds will cook basically and burst, become so no longer viable. Yeah, good question. Some initial results I saw, research on that showed that, the temperatures are very hot in the top couple inches where the weed seeds are, but they dissipate pretty quickly. And so the microbes, there are is some level of microbial activity lower, and that they like bounce back lower levels where it's not so hot. And it seasons for maybe a couple weeks, but that it should come back. Where do you find this weed ecology information? Yeah, yeah, there's our website. Um, and I want to highlight this fantastic, relatively chapters on individual weed species, has these tables of information. How many seeds does it produce? When does it produce seed? All this stuff. And I've boiled a lot of this down into a handout, which you can take. But I also put it on the box folder that you'll get later in an email. So yeah, you can take a handout. If I don't have that many, so maybe prioritize for folks who don't use internet that much. But yeah, there's key differences between species that they're very important. So we're all done talking about identifying weeds. How do you identify? Yeah. Yeah, there's a few different Cornell, depending on the commodity, the crop you're in. There's also, I guess, typically we would highlight Weeds of the Northeast, a fantastic resource with a dichotomous key in the front. You can't just flip through and look at the pictures, but if you actually want to go through and say, okay, are the leaves opposite or wrong? Proceed to page 3. Are the flowers yellow or white? Go to the next page, and then you'll eventually get the answer. But yeah, it can take a while to do that. And recently, in the past 5 years, plant ID apps have gotten really good. And they're if they're not right on the money, that they're in the ballpark typically. If you take a good picture and you have a representative specimen, so you get a lot of pictures 10 feet away, it's not going to do it. It's got to be it's got to be as close as you can get with the camera, which is usually like 4 inches before it starts to get blurry. And of something identifiable, like the seed head, or like on grasses, this color region there's a lot of identifying information there, related to auricles and the shape. It's not going to look at it, but there's something in here, if you fold it back, called a ligule. Whether there's a ligule there, whether it's full or kind of hairy, all that helps us identify grasses, which are very challenging. But yeah, apps are fantastic, and so I actually had some examples. I have 4 different stakes here. We can practice. We're running short on time in the last group, so we decided to skip it. Who has a plant ID app already? Okay, wow, most of you. So I guess we can skip it. If it was like only one of you, then maybe we could have like done a demonstration with that. But they're fairly user friendly. Um, the one that I've been most impressed with is called Picture This, and it does try to trick me every time to pay for it, but it is free. And I don't think I've ever hit the limit on how many pictures to use per day. So talking a little bit about management tactics. Um, I guess first about mulches. So for perennial fruit, one of the most common mulches is a landscape fabric, which is a woven polypropylene. Um, it's black, so it does warm the soil, which can be good or bad depending on the crop. These are water permeable, so that can be an advantage. You don't necessarily need irrigation. Um, you can use two of these and kind of cut a slit in one of them so they overlap, kind of like a zipper system. It can be a good way to do it. Um, plastics, plastic mulch, polypropylene, they do contribute to microplastics, so so that is a consideration. Yeah, rodents. Same with straw mulch or wood chip mulch. So but it really varies. I hear from some farmers that I've used mulches for 10 years. I never had an issue with the mulch. But others say, rodents destroyed everything. So I think it just varies by area and like populations of rodents. So how many cats you have, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess just play that by ear in terms of your region. Um, if you're using wood chips, so first of all, with the landscape fabric, a lot of times I see wood chips on top of it, which is not good because it collects weed seeds that blow in the wind. It's a lot easier for plants to root down through it than it is for like a leaf, to emerge through that layer. It is woven, so a tiny little root can find that crack and get down through it. So I like to see them just bare. So rain will wash all the seeds and soil away from it. How are we doing on time, Hannah? I see some people moving.
2:35, so I think we should have 5 minutes.
Five, okay.
What are they using over there on those trees?
Those are yeah. Are folks interested in herbicides? I could talk about that, or I could skip to hoeing.
I'm curious if there are any types that you think are okay to use in a vegetable garden, because I get people at it, obviously, and try to top it down, but I also don't know your farm, so it's like yeah,
Yeah, so the question, I guess I should repeat it for folks on Zoom. Question about herbicides for use in vegetables, and I guess I'll broaden that to for fruit today. Yeah, thinking about herbicides, from person to person, it kind of varies in terms of your tolerance for potentially toxic materials. There are excellent instructions basically involved with the label. The EPA does do a very thorough job in reviewing the toxicity. And actually, we have a part of our website called the EIQ, the Environmental Impact Quotient, where you can compare herbicide toxicity. So if there are different products you're interested in, different active ingredients, you can look at which maybe are softer or harder materials. And I also recently recorded a podcast episode with Dan Wickstead talking about glyphosate in particular, all the ins and outs of it. Yes, there was an agency in Europe that found it may be a carcinogen at very, very high rates. In the US, the EPA found that at labeled rates, it's unlikely to cause harm. So I'm pro like pragmatic use of it. But yeah, I didn't get to talk about the hose, but there's a wide selection of hose ranging from those that are targeting very small weeds up to very large weeds. And I think we have to go because but I think you're headed to the room. So are there any final questions? Yeah, on the handout is my email, which will be on the box folder. Feel free to contact me with any weed management questions anytime. Thank you. All right. Oh yeah. Thanks.